we are ready to get started. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. The puppy. All right, welcome everyone to Mock Trial Coaches Training. I'm so excited to have you all here tonight to learn a little bit more about how the year goes. We'll have a brief introduction. I think we have enough people where we can all go around and say just a little bit about ourselves quickly. We'll kind of do an overview of what mock trial is. We'll hear from Judge Lewis over further overview, what competitions are like, what to focus on during the year, and why mock trial is great. We have a wonderful panel joining us tonight where we have questions prepared for them. And also we'll open it up to the group to ask questions of us as staff, Judge Lewis, as well as the panel. So hopefully you'll all take away some important things by the end of tonight and it will be helpful for all of you. So without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce myself and the Youth and Government team. So I am Emily Lake. I use she, her pronouns. You've probably seen my emails bouncing around, and I'm the program director. With us on the call today is Amber Wetzel, she, her pronouns, executive director for Youth and Government, and Tibaria Al-Nouri, she, they pronouns, our brand new program supervisor who is so excited to jump in and help us on this journey throughout the year with mock trial. And then we also have Judge Robert Lewis from Clark County Superior Court, who is the author of the case and has lots of wisdom about mock trial. So let me stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone's faces. And if we could just go around and say our name, our pronouns, and our team, and what you're excited for today's training. And if we're quick, I think we can also say, like, who is our ride and die life? Who is the person who is so influential in your life that you really care about? Let me stop sharing. And I will just call on people, I think, for time's sake. Maggie, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, my name is Maggie Lewis. I use she, her pronouns, and I am part of a new mock trial team coming out of Kamiak High School in Mukilteo School District. So I'm really excited to be a part of it. I did, another lifetime ago, I did mock trial as a high school student. So I'm kind of excited to come back on the advisor side of things. I think that's what I'm most excited about. And then, okay, ride or die. I think my family is my in fact, I'm working from home, so hopefully they will not come in and crash this meeting, but apologies if they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Tracy, go ahead.
I'm Tracy Brandt. I am with Wenatchee High School. I forget what else you told me to say. I'm a court commissioner at Chelan County Superior Court, and I've been coaching the Wenatchee team for about 7 years, something like that. Ride or die are my boys, Isaiah and Christian. Yeah.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah. Andy McCarthy.
Hi, my name's Andy McCarthy. I teach and coach at Seattle Prep, and I'm just here to support the cause with Jen Freeman.
Thanks, Andy. Jennifer Freeman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Freeman. I also teach and coach at Seattle Prep, where Andy and I have been working together for, 20 years or something. And I coached in California for a while before that. So I've spent a lot of time coaching mock trial teams.
Thanks, Jennifer. Scott Davis.
Hi, everybody. Scott from the Northwest School in Seattle, he, him. I've been doing the YMCA mock trial packets for years with my senior elective course and have never done the competition and I'm not intending in the foreseeable future and actually trying to compete. We just do it as part of the curriculum, but I've always wanted to come to these coach meetings to hear what people talk about. And now that it's a Zoom option, it's really fun to be here. And I look forward to just hearing what it is like for those of you who are in the competition side. And someday maybe I'll be able to pull together a team to bring to the competitions. Ride or die. I don't know. Love my mom a lot. All right. See ya.
Thanks, Scott. Stacy.
Hi, my name is Stacey Gasparovic. I do she, her pronouns. I'm excited to learn everything I can about mock trial. I am new to the Seattle area. I just moved here from Detroit. I would have to say my grandkids are my ride or die. Oh, I'm Franklin High School, sorry.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Stacy. Alyssa.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Fritz, she, her pronouns. I am a new coach and teacher at Inglemoor High School. I think I'm just mostly excited to work with the students on our mock trial club. They are really awesome, so I'm excited to work with them and get to know more about mock trial. And let's see, ride or die would be probably my parents and my husband.
Thanks, Alyssa. Patrick.
Hi, I'm Patrick Trumpeter. I'm with University Prep. I coached for UPrep from 2001 to about 2009, but I've been gone for a while, and now I'm back. I guess I sort of rejoined the team February of last year or so. My great thanks to Dawn, the head coach at UPrep, for bringing me back. She folded me back in. I had gotten away, but she dragged me back, and I appreciate it. That's it.
Thanks, Patrick. Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Barnes, use she, her pronouns. I am split this year between North Creek High School and Inglemoor High School. So I'm with Alyssa for part of the day, but I'm actually going to be assisting with the team over at North Creek. The primary advisor there just has a lot on his plate and is super busy, and we're hoping to have enough students to have multiple teams. And so I've been asked to assist. And so I'm jumping in, and mock trial is new to me. So I am anxious to just learn all the things tonight. And as far as my ride or die, it would definitely be my sister.
Thanks, Laura. Welcome. Hathaway.
Hi, my name is Hathaway Burden. I'm an attorney at Summit Law Group, new to mock trial. My colleague Shannon Phillips works with the Jefferson team, and I'm interested in plugging in to help when I can. And my ride or die, I would say my husband and my Labradoodle puppy.
Thanks, Hathaway. Matt.
Sorry. Hi, Matt McGregor. I'm helping out build the team at Blanchette High School. This will be their first year in the program. And I'm very thankful for Mo, Kathy, and Jack, who are the three attorneys that are helping to build the team.
Thanks, Matt. Chanya.
Hi, my name is Tanya Abitabisi, and I am the student coach at Nathan Hale because our club has been run by the senior members. I've been in mock trial since freshman year, and I guess my ride or die would be my friends at this moment in time. Yeah.
Welcome, Chanya. Mo.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm with Matt McGregor, and I'm trying to help him build a team at Blanchette with Jack and Kathy.
Thanks, Mo. Chuck. Chuck, are you there? All right, we will jump to Kathleen.
Sorry, my screen's a little messed up. Hopefully it's Kathleen Kindred and Jack Kindred, and we're helping Matt McGregor and Mo with the forming of Blanchette's mock trial. Hopefully able to form a club there, and I guess that's it.
That's it.
Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourself. I'm going to share back the screen. So fundamentally, what is mock trial? Can you see my screen? Yes. Okay, perfect. So mock trial is where teens portray a part in a cast in a courtroom of characters for a trial that was written by Judge Robert Lewis. And Judge Lewis spends a lot of time writing the case to be relevant to today's issues, which we are very thankful for. And so throughout the year, students receive guidance from coaches, volunteers, attorneys, and learn about courtroom procedure and whatnot. Here we go. So teams are made up of between 7 and 16 students. Ideally, there would be 3 student attorneys for each side of the case and 4 student witnesses for each side of the case, and 1 to 2 bailiffs. For smaller teams or for teams that are smaller than 16 people, oftentimes students will learn both sides of the case and perform both in competition. In competition, there's opportunity, multiple opportunities on each side of the case. So having your team ready in that regard is important. So very brief, what the year looks like. So right now we are really in the getting started phase. We just sent out the registration packet today to all coaches. We ask that coaches fill out the information for teams to the best of their knowledge as it stands right now. And then we ask for payment prior to the new year. And then once the new year happens, we jump into district competitions. And for teams that do the best in their district competitions, then we have a state competition that happens in March. So this year, those dates are March 11th through the 13th. And few things with a few tips, if you will, for preparing for competition is to educate the students on elements of trial and legal terminology. This comes up and is very relevant in competition. Conduct auditions or assign roles to students. I know that Judge Lewis will jump into explaining more about that process, but that is just general tip for getting started. Read the case and have your students read the case. So important to be knowledgeable about all aspects of the case, and break down each witness statement into statements of fact. This is going to be so important when you're competing. Creating a timeline of event goes hand in hand with that. So what are the facts and when do they happen? Write questions so that students are prepared to answer questions from attorneys, both on the same side as well as cross-examination. Review and practice how to make effective objections. This is something that attorney raters often look for during the case. Show and demonstrate to attorneys how to submit their exhibits. Those are included as a part of the case materials that come out. And conduct practice scrimmages. So last year, something that we did was our office had a list of teams that were wanting to scrimmage with one another. And we will do the same thing again this year so that you have access to all the teams who also want to scrimmage, and then you can coordinate with them of what makes sense for your practice times. And I just wanted to show for those who are new this year to competition, I just wanted to show a brief video of what it looked like last year. It was virtual last year. However, the content is still really wonderful. And so I'm going to share my screen really quick with audio so that you can see what it looks like. And this is a video from the state competition. We're only going to watch a few moments of it, so not the whole 3 hours, but just a glimpse in. Okay. And the part that I'm going to show you is a witness in the case.
And does the defense have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Britt Smithson to the stand. But before we begin, may I ask the bailiff how much time the defense has for our case in chief?
3 minutes, Counselor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Good afternoon. I'm Britt Smithson.
Mr. Smithson, what do you do for a living?
I'm the owner of Smithson Construction, but on the side, I used to be the chapter leader of the Barryton chapter of Debunking Mysteries.
How did you get involved in this organization?
It all started back when some buddies and I founded the Barryton Alt Historical Society. We were talking about history and such, and eventually our conversation started to grow stale, and we associated with DMIT to attract some new members and ideas.
What's your role in this organization?
I'm the chapter leader, so I manage what goes on in the Barryton chapter.
How involved was Mr. Tracy Whitney in your chapter?
Not super involved. Like I said, I managed it myself.
Now, Mr. Smithson, are you familiar with Wesley Everett?
Yes, I am.
How do you know Everett?
Everett would come to the public DMIT meetings, but was never really a part of our after meeting group that would meet afterwards.
Now let's talk about the events of September 16th. Were you at the rally that day?
I was.
Was Mr. Whitney at the rally?
No, but Whitney could see what was going on through some kind of live stream, and I think they can make comments and such.
Who were the main speakers at this rally?
I gave a couple of speeches. There were some other important DMIT members that gave some speeches, and Wesley Everett also spoke twice.
Did you know that Everett was going to speak twice?
I didn't know Everett was going to speak at all.
What happened the second time Everett spoke?
That was when Everett jumped up on the statue holding my sledgehammer and started attacking the statue. And I can go ahead and tell you that's not what that tool is used for.
Do you know how Everett got a hold of your sledgehammer?
I love watching these videos. I think it's so cool to see these students performing the case in that way. So we are going to go into Judge Lewis's section, but first I want to check to see if there's any preliminary questions.
No questions in the chat.
Perfect. Okay. Let me share back my screen. Also, I apologize for any buffering or sound issues. My computer is experiencing some of that today for some reason, but the actual quality of the video is pretty good. So if it came across sort of funky, that is why, and I'm happy to share out the link after our training. All right, Judge Lewis, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you, Emily. I hope everyone can hear me all right. I'm Judge Robert Lewis, the program chair for the State Mock Trial Committee, and I've had the honor to hold that position since 2005, when I took over from Judge William Downing, who continued to write the cases for many years until the last few years. So I was indebted to him for showing me how to do things. And I'm going to try to give you a brief overview of mock trial and competitions and what you might expect, and give you some pointers. If there is any conflict between what I tell you and what the coaches panel tells you, go with the coaches panel because they have all run successful mock trial teams. I have run 0 successful mock trial teams. So I used to help out with the Camas team when my son was there and for a few years after. But the things we're going to talk to you about are, it's kind of an overview of some of the things that appear to work over the years. I was asked to provide a historical overview, I think, on the theory that I'm so old and have been around so long that I would know everything. But actually, mock trial started in 1989, long before I was involved in it, and has been run by the Y for a number of years. And we started out with 8 teams at the state tournament, and now we have 24 teams and have teams hopefully all over the state. So it's expanded as a program. And if there's one thing that as coaches, I want to emphasize to you is that it is an educational program first and a competition second. It's cleverly hidden as a competition because that's the nature of trials. But its primary value, the reason it's, you asked me to say why it's great is because it helps students to learn how to think about common critical issues, to present themselves well, to talk in a civil way, and to focus on relevant evidence. There just are so many things in life that you benefit from by learning through the mock trial process. And because it is an educational experience and the competition is secondary, I will emphasize to you again, there is absolutely no reason ever to drop out of mock trial unless your kids are saying to themselves, we really don't want to learn how to be good citizens and to engage in appropriate civic behavior. So the winning and the losing is secondary. I have students who tell me that they'd had a great time and learned a lot from mock trial, even though they never won one single trial in one of our competitions. So try to focus on doing a good job with them. They'll take care of the competitive part. That's the way high school students are, but focus with them on helping to learn valuable lessons as this program provides. So let me talk to you a little bit about what's in the case. If you could switch to the next slide, Emily. I'm not going to tell you what's in this year's case. You'll see it next week. But I wanted to tell you about what a case normally contains. You can see the kit, which is the part of the mock trial that covers our rules and our history and some tips for coaches and things. That doesn't vary too much from year to year. But next week, we'll be releasing the 2021-22 case. And it's usually a document of about 60 to 80 pages total. It has a brief introduction and a witness list, exhibit list, and some stipulations, things that are given in the competition. We have a civil case this year, which means for attorneys and for coaches, you'll get a complaint where one person is suing the other person and explaining why they think that they should have to pay them damages. Now, the students are not going to deal with damage issues. They're mainly going to talk about liability issues, whether or not a person is liable. And then if a person would have found liable, it's stipulated that they're going to deal with damage issues at some later date, which of course they never do. In addition to the complaint, you'll get an answer that has not only some denials and admissions of the allegations in the complaint, but we'll have some affirmative defenses. And you'll get a set of jury instructions that are pretty much from our Washington State jury instructions about how a civil case of this type is decided. And then you will receive 8 witness statements, 4 for the plaintiff side and 4 for the defense side, each about 3 to 5 pages in length. There will be 6 exhibits, each of them 1 or 2 pages of various types that students are going to use during the trial. And pretrial motions will be, there's one pretrial motion that's argued, there's a brief response to that, and then the last part of it is materials to be used in the argument of the pretrial motion. So that's what a case looks like. And in the next slide, talk about a couple of things that you should do when you receive the case. And when you look it over, some things to keep in mind. The first is, that's a lot of information to have that many pages, and it is not expected that that your students are going to be able to present even a fraction of the information that's contained. Mock trial is a timed event, used to take about 2 hours. Now with objection stopping the clock, it takes a little closer to 3 hours many times. But in that period of time, the students have to present closing or opening statements, witness testimony, closing arguments, and their pretrial motion, and those are all timed events. They have a limited amount of time to present the information. So as you're looking through the information with them, the witness statement, you need to remember that you cannot use it all. They need to recognize that in many cases, less is more, that trying to cram in too many things in that 2 to 3 hours may be less effective presentation than picking out a single theme and building on that theme with just the information that supports that theme. And not everything, I will have to admit that every year of that 4 pages, 3 to 5 pages for a witness statement, a lot of the stuff in it is not really relevant to what you're going to present. It's backstory, trying to make the character more interesting. If I found something interesting in the researching of the case, I may include some information about that just to show the students, but it probably is not something that they're going to present. So interesting does not equal helpful in most cases in terms of presenting your case. And not all witnesses are created equal. Each team is given a certain amount of time to present direct testimony and cross-examine witnesses. There will be some witnesses they probably want to spend 8 to 10 minutes on for direct examination, and then others that they may only spend a few minutes on. And so that's another thing that they learn, to try to separate the wheat from the chaff and recognize what it is that they're going to need to cover. Recognize who the jury is in the trials that we'll be doing. We have competitions where an actual judge, whenever possible, is the judge over a case. We have a trial that lasts 2 to 3 hours, and it's rated or judged and scored by attorneys. So in a real trial in court, attorneys rarely are left on juries by other attorneys. So you're presenting to lay people who know very little about the law and about presentation in court. Here, the opposite is true. Your attorneys are people who are knowledgeable in the law and may try the types of cases that you're presenting. And so you're looking to try to present in a way that they would think is a good way to present it, to highlight the things they might think would be persuasive, and to not to assume that they know everything, but to recognize that they are looking at not whether you convince them to allow people to be awarded damages, but whether they think you've been presenting your case effectively. And just one word on the pretrial motion. The pretrial motion is not a research problem. We give the students all of the motions and all of the materials that they can rely on to craft their arguments for and against the motion. Usually they have 6 to 8 cases. They may have some portions of a law review article. They may have a statute or a court rule or something, but they look at that material and that's what they use. Even if there are other cases out there that deal with the same issue, they don't have to go out and find those things. We don't let them cite those things. They can rely on the fact that the other teams will only be using the materials that we provide in the packet. So keep that in mind. It's not a research problem. Next slide then talks about a suggested approach for dealing with this. When your team gets together, as Emily mentioned, one of the first things you do when you get this case is at least at some point in the first few days that you have it, everybody needs to read it over at least once. Yeah, your witnesses and attorneys, even if they're not going to be presenting particular parts of the case, need to have some idea what's being said in this case. You really can't understand it unless you've read the whole thing. So after they've read it, have a session where all of your team gets together and talks about the case. What type of a case it is, what is the plaintiff trying to prove, and what is the defense trying to disprove. If there's an affirmative defense, what is it that they're trying to prove for the defense, and what would the plaintiff have to disprove? I can tell you that in this case that's coming out, so you get some little inside extra information here, there will be an answer that not only denies certain parts of the liability that the complaint brings out, but also has several listed affirmative defenses. So as a team, you may decide that you want to present one or more of those affirmative defenses as part of your presentation. One of the interesting things about mock trial is that each team approaches it a little differently. As I mentioned, there's no way you can effectively present all of the points, legal and factual, that are there. And so you may be practicing all along with the idea that you're going to present this one affirmative defense in your defense case. And you may come up against a team that never mentions it. They may be talking about another affirmative defense, or they may be talking about some base liability question that has nothing to do with the affirmative defenses. So your team not only has to think about what they're presenting, they have to be prepared in trial to try to respond to the things that the other team is presenting. And so that's why it's important to know and to look over the case and to refer to the entire case at several points during the process. So get your team together, talk about the case, about the strengths and weaknesses that you see, and try to build a theme. I think most people will tell you that one of the things that you need to do is to think about what is going to be the plaintiff's overall theme in the case. And you build the theme early on because that helps to decide what parts of each witness's statement you're going to try to present, what parts of each statement you're going to try to highlight in cross-examination, how you're going to draft your opening and closing. And so a theme is an essential part of trying to bring the case all together. It doesn't mean you can't bring in other things or that you shouldn't deal with other issues, but it means that in sorting things out, that's what you're trying to look at. And then also list as part of this first meeting, what other types of attacks might the defense make against the plaintiff, and what kind of responses should the plaintiff be prepared to make, so that teams start to be thinking about the fact that there may be other ways that this will be brought to your attention, and that you can't just rely on one way of it being presented. That's why it's so important to scrimmage and to get to know other people, because other teams, because one of the biggest, rudest things that you can have happen is you'll be practicing, you practice against your own team over and over and over again. You practically know what the other person's going to say before you say it. And then you go into a competition and somebody starts talking about things or asking witnesses questions that you've never really even considered at that point. And so that's why you want to shake it up in your own practices, and you want to deal with it. And if you have an attorney assisting your team, which I would highly recommend, they can help you shape these sorts of things. Next slide. I'm trying to keep mindful of not using up everybody's time here. After you've talked about it as a team, I would break your team up into smaller groups. Have each one of them, 2 to 3 people, chart each witness's statement, kind of do a little outline. What are the main facts the witness can do to help the plaintiff side? What are the main facts that the witness can do for the other side? So you've got a plaintiff witness, you're looking at what can that witness say that helps the plaintiff side. in the case. And then you say, well, wait a minute, there's some other things that this person might be able to help the defense side. So what do we want to bring out in cross-examination? And then on that chart, you should have a couple of columns that I wouldn't fill in right away, which is a list of potential objections to particular facts that you want to bring in or the other side wants to use. We have rules of evidence that is part of the learning process, and the students are learning to make objections and to meet them. The main ones they're going to talk about are hearsay objections. The witness is saying something that another person out of court told them. Relevance, they're trying to bring in something that really doesn't have anything to do with the case. If it's an expert witness, you may be challenging their qualifications to say the opinion involved. And so those are the kind of objections they'll eventually need to learn to make. But I wouldn't try to deal with that issue almost immediately. That's for a little farther down the road. For now, just have them look at how can the witness help me on the plaintiff side or defense side? How can the witness hurt me? After your small groups have done that, then get back together as a team and have each, go ahead and switch to the next slide then, Emily, if you wouldn't mind. After the teams have, the small groups have done that, have the team get together and have each team of students present their findings, have the group discuss them, see how the evidence fits the theme. Do we need to modify the theme? The group can say, well, why didn't you cover this? It's part of that learning process. If they read the witness statement and they think something important in there should have been brought in, then they can talk about that. And that's why each student needs to review each and needs to participate in that process for figuring it out. And then after you've done that sort of preliminary review a couple of times, and I don't mean to suggest that you need to do that like certain teams who shall remain nameless, but who won the state tournament last year. You don't need to do it at midnight on the night the case comes out. You need to, spread it out over a little period of time, put it in smaller chunks so that people can do that, especially if you have newer students. So the next slide will indicate some other things, and I'm not going to go into the art of assigning parts, but one of the things you as a coach are going to do either on your own or with your advisors, or maybe even with student input if you have knowledgeable students, is you are going to have to assign parts to people. You're going to have attorneys, 2 or 3 on each side, witnesses, 1 for each person, and you need to try to make sure that you don't set up a situation where the witnesses would be competing at the same time. Each team has to have 7 to 16 witnesses. You cannot cross from, if you're bringing 2 teams, you cannot cross back and forth. So set up 2 or 3 witnesses, 2 or 3 attorneys per side, 4 witnesses for each side. If you have to make smaller teams, try to make sure that an attorney for the plaintiff is a witness for the defense, rather than try to have that. I'm going to let the panel talk a little bit more about that. Then you need to figure out the attorney witness combinations. Which attorney is going to handle which witness on direct, which attorney is going to handle which witness on cross, and you're going to have to get a feel for how to get people who are going to work together to make that effective. Which of your attorneys are going to do the opening, which is going to do the closing, and which is going to do the motion. The opening and closing have to be done by different attorneys. One attorney cannot do both of those things. And I would only suggest that every team should have backups. Make sure that you have your people not only learn their main part and participate in their main part, but they learn at least one other role, because inevitably somebody gets sick, somebody might drop out, somebody may have something that keeps them from being at the competition. And you don't want to have somebody figure that out at the very end. You want to have a backup or an understudy, someone who can step in if necessary. Next slide, Emily. Or whoever's doing the slides. And then after you've assigned your parts, people are doing their preparation and practice. They're drafting, opening, and closing. They're doing charts with their witnesses about how they're going to ask them questions and how they're going to expect the witness to answer. And the witnesses have to be very familiar with their part, because they are not allowed to have notes on the stand. So they need to be very familiar not only with what is going to be asked of them by your attorneys, but to have a good memory of what it is that is going to be in the statement. So if they're asked about it by the other side, they can do that. The students do the drafting, and they can have your assistants as coaches or attorneys, but they really do not benefit from the learning process unless they do it themselves. There's 3 good reasons why the students do the drafting. The first is, as I mentioned, this is an educational program for the student. We don't need coaches and attorneys and parents to learn how to draft things. We need to help students to learn how to draft things and how to present. Second, the student has to present it. So if you have a closing argument that's drafted by somebody else and uses words and phrases that a student is not really that familiar with, they are going to have trouble presenting it. It will make it a little easier for them to present it if they are the person who actively involves in it and works on giving it over and over again. And the third reason is that's the rules. You're not supposed to do it for them. They're supposed to do it for themselves. And coaches, you are the primary people responsible for making sure everybody follows the rules. We do not have an elaborate system where we haul people up to the disciplinary board and conduct investigations and that sort of thing. We anticipate if you are using your Y core values that your students will by and large follow the rules. I always say draft, cut, and then cut again, because for witness presentations, for opening and closing, I see one of the things that students have to learn is it's more important to make an effective presentation that goes slowly or relatively slowly and raises a few points than in a 5-minute opening statement to try to cover 35 points by talking as fast as you can. And that's hard. People don't know that at first. And you often hear in the preliminary stages, people trying to cram in every detail, and it just doesn't work. So they learn first to draft out what they want to say. They time it. And then it turns out that they're going to have to cut it. And then they're probably going to have to cut it again so that they can get in that time limit. And so they have time to speak, to make effective gestures, to really connect with the jury, to be persuasive. And then the last slide I think I have is related to preparation and practice in general. They really need to practice speaking. This is one of the real benefits of mock trial, is that students, some of whom come in with very little public speaking or speaking in front of people, they really get the benefit of learning how to do it. Speaking in front of other people, practicing in the mirror is great, but you need to get people in and to give their closing and give it again and try it again and just get in the habit of speaking in front of other people, and then let them comment in a positive way about how they might make their presentations better. You need to scrimmage as soon as you get comfortable, as soon as you start having people ready with closings and openings and that, start scrimmaging and start having people at least do partial presentations of the trial so they can get used to people maybe objecting or get used to people presenting something they hadn't thought of. Witnesses can get used to being up on the stand. I recommend, I know that some teams are very secretive. I don't recommend that. You need to scrimmage with other people. It's unfortunate that we only have one district tournament and then a certain number of teams go to the state tournament. So for many students, if they only go to the tournament, then they don't get that many opportunities to present the case and they don't get the full benefit of the learning. So encourage it. I encourage you to, in your local area, in other places, try to set up scrimmages, practices with other people where you can present some or all of your case. You can hear how other people present the case, and it's very, I think as you get closer, it's very, very meaningful, and you should do that. And in your own practices, throw each other curves. Ask the defense team, okay, this time you've been focusing, for the last 3 times we practices, you've been focusing on this defense. I want you to forget about that defense and raise this defense. Or the plaintiff, you've been harping on this theory of liability, look at this theory of liability, so that each person can figure out how that's going to come up in the real competition, and so that they can learn how to respond to it, and they can think about the case in different ways. And then last, but by no means least, go to the tournaments and participate. And that gets us to our last slide. The tragedy of the dropout. Every year, it's January, it's a couple of weeks before the tournament, and somebody calls Emily or calls me and says, you know, we're just not going to go. We paid the fees, we've got the kids, we've been practicing, and we don't think we're good enough. We think we're going to get creamed. The kids are, you know, unsure about this. And so they don't participate. I don't know how else to say it. It's absolutely unacceptable. I'm going to take down the names of each one of you. And if your team tries to drop out, we are going to find you and make you get back in this tournament. This tournament is the way that these kids learn. If nothing else, they learn that you get what you put into things. So if you get creamed, you get creamed. If you see nothing else, you get a chance to see how other people handle it better than you. You see the things that work and don't work. And you'd surprise yourself. You think, oh, I'm not going to have a very good time of it. Even if you don't win a case, you may win a ballot. You may get some constructive criticism from people involved. The value is in the participation, not in winning the tournament or not in winning a trial. It's in trying to do your best and learning about it. And you can't learn unless you're there. So get that in your students' mindset from day one. We're going to the tournament. We're going to compete. You need to get ready to go because we're going. And then don't let them try to convince you otherwise. Check and make sure that whatever tournament you have, that they clear their schedule so they can get there. Or if they can't, then you need to get somebody else to do their part. But be there, be at the tournament, compete, and get the full benefit of mock trial. And Mr. Davis, I applaud you for using it's all these years. I find it very hard to understand why people don't come and participate, because we're talking about at most 7 people. Somebody just told me that Kashmir apparently was thinking about having a team, but their high school decided they couldn't do it. I think there aren't 7 kids in Kashmir that want to do this. It's important that people do this program, and I would encourage you not only to do it yourself, bring multiple teams if you can, have the biggest teams you can, and encourage other people to come, because this is, I've got to tell you why it's great. It's great because it's the best civics education program in the state. It's the best civics education program in the state. And the only way you get the benefit of it is to fully participate in it. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to stop sharing my mouth. I'm going to let the panel tell you more about it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Judge Lewis. Love to hear from you. Our next segment of this training is we have a panel here. So we have Jennifer Freeman from Seattle Prep Academy and Tracy Brandt from Wenatchee High School. And I'm unsure if Tony was able to hop on the call. So while we try to get him connected, we will start with our panel. And I'm going to stop sharing screen so we can all look at each other's faces for this. So give me 1 second. Okay. Tabaria and I will be going back and forth asking questions. And for the first 2 questions, they're going to both panelists. So we will start with Tracy. Tracy, please tell us about yourself.
Okay, well, I already said that I am the Chelan County full-time Superior Court Commissioner. So we just have one in Chelan County, so I don't rotate. I stay in the same place, which is nice. I have all the juvenile offenders, all the dependencies, do a lot of family law. And then I do the law and motion calendar every other week for the judges. I was an attorney for about 18 years before I was appointed, and I've been on the bench for a little over 3 years. My brother Frank and I started the mock trial program at Wenatchee High School, I want to say 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. My son was a junior and now he's graduated from college. So I don't know. I think it was like around 7 or 8 years ago. And he's a lawyer, but he's actually he doesn't practice. He's a teacher. He's not doing it this year. So I'm kind of on my own. This year is going to be probably a lot different. We have never had school involvement. We've been completely outside of the school. So this year I've got a couple teachers that I'm trying to kind of get help. I thought they were actually going to be on this, and I was looking back to see if I sent them the Zoom link, and I didn't. I don't know if I sent it before. I sent it now. So I see that you're recording this, so maybe I can send this to them. But yeah, so I think that's it in terms of my background.
Thanks so much, Tracy. And Jennifer, same question, please tell us about yourself.
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Jen Freeman. Like I said, I teach at Seattle Prep. I teach in the English and the math departments, both. I've been coaching mock trial, I think from the very first day I was a teacher. When I was 23, I think, at my brand new school, I was so excited to have a job and be a teacher. And the former mock trial coach came to me and said, "Hey, you're brand new. Would you like to help with the mock trial team?" And you know, when you have your first job, you say yes to everything, right? And so I said, "Sure, that sounds like fun." I had no idea what it was, nothing. And we didn't have it at my school that I remember. So I didn't know what I was saying yes to, but I was young and foolish. So I said yes. And I'm not kidding. The next day they passed out the list of people who were in charge of extracurricular activities. And I was the head mock trial coach. Still didn't know what it was. So I had to learn through pretty hard experience. This was in California. And if you know anything about mock trial, you know, California is a really, really competitive state. There's a ton of teams in California. And so it was trial by fire for sure. And I learned a lot about what to do, what not to do. And the things I learned what not to do is because I did them and it didn't work out all that well. So, so that's a lot of my experience. I've been at Prep now for 23 years, I think, 24. Most of those years I've coached mock trial with Andy. We've done it together the entire time. And we have some other coaches that help us out as well. And we've had a lot of kids come through the program and do a variety of things with the skills that they learn. Some are lawyers, some are in law school as we speak. We have a lot of kids who do lots of other things though, and still talk about the skills that they learned through mock trial and how well they translate into all sorts of fields. So that's at least a little bit about me.
Thank y'all. We're going to transition into the longer answer questions. And maybe this is a good transition, Jennifer, because you talked about the things that you learned the hard way. This question is what advice you would give to brand new coaches? You have 2 minutes for each question.
Know what it is before you sign up. That would be good. I think you have to give yourself a little bit of grace and not expect everything to be perfect all the time. We had a former teacher at our school who used to like to use that phrase, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Allow things to be good and not necessarily perfect, especially when you're starting. Like, it's just so much to learn how to do. But the most important things, it seems to me, are kids enjoying each other, kids learning how to write, how to speak, how to think on their feet, and how to work together as a team. It seems like it's a bunch of individual little tasks, but I would put our team up against anything at prep, and there's a lot of teams at prep, in terms of team spirit, team camaraderie, team bonding. I think those are the most important things. So if you just pull those things off somewhat, you're doing a great job. You learn more as you go through things. And I would echo what Judge Lewis said. Well, I'd echo a couple of things, but going to tournaments is really the best way to get better. You see what other people do. You learn things from the way their teams are coached. And you learn from your mistakes too. And I think all of those things only happen in tournaments. They don't happen in practice. And so I would say, even if you think you're not going to be good, I'd go anyway, for sure. It's worth it. And the kids have a really, really good time with each other. The second thing I would say is make sure that you remind yourself now and then why you're doing it. I think it's easy sometimes to slip into trying to be efficient or trying to make things better because you could do it better, rather than let the kids try and fail and learn from their mistakes. You know, I could write a great closing for somebody and they'd probably do reasonably decent. We have never once done that. And so I strongly recommend, it's not the fastest way to do things, but I strongly recommend that your kids write all their own stuff. The first time you look at their attempt at an opening, it won't be good. It's okay. It won't be good. But I would let them help, or let them make it better with your help, rather than try to do it yourself. When I coached in California, I had lawyer coaches who, you know, they had their own practices. They were efficient people. And they're like, here, just let me write this cross. And they would hand it off to a kid. Or they'd write a closing for a student. And I had a student give a closing once that was written for her, which in retrospect, I would never, ever do now. But was written for her. And the judge, who was pretty crotchety, said to her, yeah, that's too argumentative. And she did not know what he meant. And so she just stood there, like almost in tears. He was pretty mean to her. Like, I hope judges don't do this, but, and she didn't know what to do. She was completely stymied. She had no idea what to do because she didn't write it. She didn't know what the judge meant by being argumentative. She was, I'll never forget it. And that was my fault. Like, I let that happen. And so that's what I mean about learning from your mistakes. So since I've been in Seattle, especially with working with Andy, like we would never send a kid out with something that we had written for them. Not just out of the fear of messing up, but mostly out of my sense of responsibility as a teacher. And my sense of understanding what this whole program is supposed to be about in the first place. So those are my two sort of really big things. And if anybody has questions while I'm talking, feel free to interrupt me. My students do all the time, so no worries.
And Tracy, if you wanted to touch on that question, otherwise we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I guess what I would just say, as far as, I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of advice. I thought Judge Lewis did an excellent job just with his overview about everything. I was thinking, what do they need us for? You did a really good job kind of laying out what, how you would go about it. I do want to say this, when my brother and I started, we had no clue. We really, I mean, we're both lawyers, and I'm like, mock trial. I mean, I honestly didn't know what it was and anything about it. And thankfully, Andy McCarthy was so kind to us. I mean, he literally kind of sat us down and said, look, they don't read off because we didn't know that things should be memorized. We honestly had no idea. So he was so helpful to us. And I really felt like that modeled to us what we now want to be to other new coaches. When you don't know, we all benefit, when we're helping each other. The kids benefit when we help each other. So I think if you look at the big picture, I mean, that's why we're doing this. This is not the only volunteer work I do with kids. I love kids. And so this to me is just like my element. I love being with the kids. I love working with the kids. As far as, I guess, some specific advice, I really encourage getting as much support and help as you can. And the reason I say that, and we normally have 2 teams, and I mean, legal help, non-legal help, parent support. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to mock trial, and it can be overwhelming. I feel a little overwhelmed this year because my brother's not coaching and we don't have a lot of returners. And so I'm trying to kind of, figure out a different way. But thankfully, I have experience. And so I know that it's just a lot. And so it's very, very nice to have people, even if someone's not your main coach, there's someone to say, hey, you know what, I'll come in and watch one of your practices, I'll come in and just maybe kind of listen to one of your speeches, or something like that. And I don't know, I would never discount that. And so I think it's good to get advice and help. The one thing that Jennifer said that I cannot agree more with is the kids enjoying it. That's the whole, if it's not fun, they're not coming back. I mean, it has to be fun. It's fun to them, I will say, when they see growth, we see it and I love it, but when they see growth in themselves, that's exciting and they want to do it more. So I would agree on the competition thing. I mean, I've had kids tell me before we get to the state tournament, I'm not doing mock trial. I just want you to know I'm not doing mock trial next year. And then after the tournament, okay, I changed my mind because it's so much fun. I mean, it really is. It's such a great experience for the kids. And I don't know, I just love to see them grow. So I guess that's my answer to that.
Thanks so much, Tracy. Our next question, and I will preface this, the decision has not been made for this year, virtual or in person. But my next question for the panelists is, how was your experience with the virtual courtrooms last year? And Tracy, we'll start with you.
Okay, so I'm going to be honest, I feel kind of strong about this, just because I've had experience before. I recognize we had to do what we had to do, and I totally respect that. I'm hoping that we get to be in person, and one of the main reasons why is I feel like a lot of what the kids benefit from and a lot of what they learn about being in a courtroom, where to stand, I mean, all those things, you lose all of that when you do it virtually. I mean, it's certainly better than nothing, and we learned a lot and made adjustments. But I just think that there's just a lot of things that I love to be able, I mean, I have mostly all new kids this year, and they don't even know, they don't know the basic things about being in a courtroom, and there's just a lot to that. And I think it also, I don't know, the education of that and, being able to make eye contact with their speeches and things like that, which it's not the same through a computer. I just feel like, I don't know. I just prefer in person. I just think that there's a lot that's lost, and the kids want to be, at least my team last year, they were, bummed, but you know, we did what we had to do, and we appreciated that we still got to compete. So yeah.
Thanks, Tracy. And Jennifer, would you like to answer that question as well?
Sure. I think I'd say I was really grateful for next year or for last year. I'm looking back and even talking on this Zoom right now, because we've been back in the classroom, you know, for a while now. But even being on this call is making me a little twitchy because I've managed to ditch Zoom in a lot of my life now, which is just so wonderful. But I'm really grateful that we pulled it off last year too. You know, I told you guys this at the end of last year, you read a lot of stories about kids having emotional problems and mental breakdowns and stuff because of Zoom. And I will say till my dying day that being able to do mock trial was one of the things that helped our kids stay away from that, like really keep them straight and sane and not falling apart and able to keep doing school and turn on their cameras and all of that. I just think that was a great thing for them. So I'm super grateful that we were able to do it. I also thought the process software was a pretty awesome thing, just in terms of running tournaments. Like I know there were probably glitches on the backside, but from our point of view, it was fantastic. But I will agree with Tracy. I think in person is 100 times better. When we competed at the national tournament last year, we were able to at least have the kids in the same building competing together. They were still on screens, but they were in a building together. And their joy at being like even somewhat proximate to their classmates is just a wonderful thing. They were so happy. And in the beginning of this school year, when we had our first class, like they're just beside themselves being happy to be together. And it's, you know, it's mid-October. If they were going to get over it, they would have gotten it over it by now. And they're still just so thrilled to be back with each other. So we'll do whatever we have to do. We'll be vaccinated, masked, hand sanitizers, whatever you want, like little plastic pods around us. We'll do whatever you need. But we would really, really hope that we can do it in person, because it's just better. It's just so much better.
Thank you all for sharing your perspectives on that. Our final question for the long answer section is about how you inspire students to get out of their comfort zones. And just want a reminder that it's a 2-minute answer so that we can get to the speed round and also leave time for everyone to ask questions to y'all as well.
Do you want me to start or?
Yeah.
Okay. As far as, I guess, inspiring students to come out of their comfort zone, one of the things that I think, and I kind of already started this, I only have a couple of returners, but one of the things that I think is very inspiring to kids that know nothing about mock trial is I pull up one of my experienced kids, one of my seniors or someone, you know, who's very comfortable and have done it. And I had a girl do this. She gave her closing argument from last year. And the kids were like, wow, she's really good. That's so awesome. And I'm like, and you guys can do this. You can do this. It just takes practice, you know? And so I think having someone else do it, because it's scary. I mean, it's scary for anybody to speak in public if you're not used to it. And then a kid with their peers, you know, and we've got, you know, freshmen, and it's intimidating. And so I think the one thing that I have felt is like, you know, having them kind of model, this is what you do. And then even not just modeling it, but helping the younger kids. And I'm fortunate. I only have a couple kids coming back, but they are such great leaders. I'm just really thankful for that, because I just think that helps. And the other thing too is also, and again, I do juvenile court, I'm just really big on being positive. So even if they do it the first time and it's horrible, I find something that's good. I mean, I will say your projection was great, or just whatever it is. I find something that's positive instead of going, you did this and this and this, you know, because I just think, you know, why would they come back? Why would they want to keep doing it if, you know, so I just try to be encouraging, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. My camera is doing something strange. Sorry, I'm not visible there, but I would agree. I think I tell my kids to be brave sometimes, and just go ahead and do it. And if it's, like I said, the perfect is the enemy of the good. So I'm not expecting you to be perfect. So I think that helps them. I also think, and I would save this for key moments, I think there's an awful lot of power in telling a kid that you believe in them. And so if they're scared and they can't believe in themselves because they're scared, I think there's a lot of power in saying, I believe in you. I've said that I save it because it's I don't want to overuse it, but I think that's something that if you tell a student, they will remember that. And they can't, kids, sometimes they can't believe anything good about themselves. But if somebody that is an adult in their lives tells them something good about themselves, they'll believe you before they'll believe themselves. And so I think that's a powerful thing to tell kids. We also pair up experienced kids with new kids. And, we have the luxury of having lots of kids to do that. But I like for our older kids to take sort of a mentoring role with the new kids. The other day, one of our returners, Daniela actually, asked if she could use my classroom at lunch because there were a couple of freshmen who wanted to practice their tryout speeches with her, and could they use my classroom at lunch? And I let them, and I thought, well, maybe I should be in there. And then I'm like, let me just sit outside and keep an ear on them. But I don't want them to be scared by me right now. Let them work with Daniela for a little while, and then try putting it in front of everybody else. So I think older kids like to take responsibility for the success of the younger kids. And I think that that's a good lesson for the older kids too. And so we do a lot of mentoring older kids, younger kids.
Thank you so much. And so now we'll go into our speed round. So we have 4 questions. We're looking for like 30-second answers to a minute. And Jennifer, why don't you start here? How do you recruit students for your team?
We have we have this period called window, and it's when activities can meet. So like newspaper and band and choir and all of that. So our students have the opportunity to sign up for window classes, and that's our big sign up right there. We also are really lucky that our school is super supportive. Our mock trial banners that we have won are hanging in the gym with all of the sports banners. And we get a lot of props from the administration, from admissions people, like the whole bit. So we're really lucky that way, that there's a lot of word of mouth at our school already. Your best word of mouth, though, is always going to be the older kids and the younger kids. And so getting the older kids to go out and keep an eye out for kids that they think would be good, and talking to them, I think that's probably the most helpful and the most impactful for the younger kids.
Okay, so as far as the way we recruit, we've never recruited before until this year. Frank and I have never done anything to recruit. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're not in the school. And I would say most of the people at the high school don't even know that we have a mock trial program. I mean, honestly, they don't, because we're not connected at all. He doesn't teach there, and I'm obviously not there either. But this year, the 2 seniors that we have, one of them's in, I don't know what, she's somehow in ASB or something. She promoted the program this year through a club fair. And I guess they have some kind of club fair because and this is one part of the other reason why my brother's not coaching, but they cut our class. So we no longer have a mock trial class, and the kids don't get credit for it. And just, I don't know, it's just kind of a rough year that way. But so she brought it up several times at their club fair, and we have I don't know how many kids are actually going to stay with it, but we have a lot of, in fact, almost everybody is new except just like a couple kids. So I guess that's one way if you have a club. She said they have like a club fair. They did it like 2 or 3 times, and that's how she kind of got the word out. But prior to that, it was word of mouth. So other kids, yeah.
Thank y'all. What fun activities do you do at practices to get students engaged? And Tracy, you can start.
So the first thing I wrote down on this is I bring candy. They always know me as the candy one. I always bring treats. I don't know why, because I like treats, and I just feel like, because sometimes we're there a couple hours, and I don't know. I just feel like I feel bad keeping them without having food. So, I think the thing is one thing I feel really bad about too is that when there's just me and Frank or whatever, and we have, say, 20 kids, I don't like having kids sit around and wait while we're working with 3 kids. So that's one thing you have to kind of figure out. How are you going to make that work? I mean, and generally what we do when we practice at the courthouse, we have jury rooms. And so we'll split people up. You guys go to this jury room, we'll go to this jury room, and then we'll practice in different areas. And I think we used to have like team building events, and I'm considering doing one this year with the kids because I don't know any of these kids. When I say team building events, I mean like when the case comes out, sometimes we would have like a case coming out party where we'd have pizza and we'd all get the case and kind of hang out and talk and, oh my gosh, did you read this yet? And, just kind of stuff like that. But it's really, going back to kind of the camaraderie. I mean, it's a team, and, I want them to feel that soon. And you have to spend time together and kind of build it. So,
yeah. I would say, I don't know, at the beginning of the year, we do some stuff to help them learn each other's names. Because I think that's pretty essential. Especially if you have a lot of kids in the room, like figuring out people's names helps a lot. And the other thing, I agree with Tracy in terms of planning your practices a little bit so that you don't have kids coming to practice and just sitting waiting for their witness role to come up. A little bit of planning before your practices, like if you put your practice together, like a practice calendar or something, and you figure out, okay, on this day, we're working on direct examinations with the prosecution witnesses. On this day, we're going to do, like, plan it out so that you're not calling all the kids all the time to every practice. So that you use their time well. I think that's pretty important, especially for witnesses, because you want them, well, you just don't want them sitting around, doing nothing. The other thing I would say, though, is find ways for kids to take part in other parts of the practice. For example, if you're not doing a particular witness's role right away, like have that person play the judge for a different practice, or have that person object. They're a witness. They may not know how to object, but they can take a stab at it. I think you could come up with other things for them to do. And then the last thing I'd say is to keep your witnesses engaged, because that's the harder one. They should help write the questions in their examinations. They shouldn't just be in charge of the answers. They should help do the writing as well. They'll answer better anyway. So try to keep kids engaged with stuff, like give them things to do in every practice, I would say.
Thank you so much. And I think we will do one last question as a part of this speed round, and leave time to open it up to everyone else. So my last question is, how often do you have, it's a 2-part question. How often do you have practices, and how long are your practices? What does that look like throughout the year? And Jennifer, go ahead.
Well, like I said, we have a 45-ish minute block that meets probably about 2 times a week. It kind of depends on the schedule. That's not nearly enough time though. So we do after school practices as well. And you have to do a lot of dancing with kids who are involved in play and basketball and all sorts of other things. So it helps kids to have a regular schedule. So we, for a lot of the time, we do 2 practices after school. And time ramps up the closer we get to competition. So our practices get longer after the new year. And we start having more of them as we get closer and closer to competition. So it kind of varies for us. It is a class at our school. They do get a credit for it, which helps out a ton if you can get your school to give you that. I know that's really, really hard with a lot of schools though. So, but it does, I'm not even sure they really need the credit, but for some reason that seems to matter to people a lot.
As far as when we practice her often, I would agree with Jennifer that as closer the competition gets, obviously the more that we kind of increase our practice time. There are times where we only practice once a week. Well, when we used to have the class, it was 4 days a week, but now we don't have that this year. And so I've like seen the kids once. I mean, that's, the case hasn't come out, but I mean, usually we would have seen them a lot more, especially all the new kids, and trying to get them prepped up for tryouts. But probably twice a week, just depending. And the thing, one of the biggest challenges is kids that do mock trial, at least in my experience, are these high achiever kids, and they're in everything. I mean, I've got kids in sports, I have kids in drama, kids in, you know, DECA and speech and debate, and just, so it's really trying to figure out, I mean, I try to be as flexible as I can to meet their schedules. And sometimes that means I'm there multiple times just to accommodate the different kids, which is really tough, but you know, that's why it's good to have lots of help if you can, so.
Thank you so much. So now we'll open it up. Anyone on the call, it's fair game. You can ask us as staff, you can ask the panelists, you could ask Judge Lewis. And feel free to put your questions in the chat or to come off mute and ask them out loud.
Well, before somebody asked, I'd just like to comment on the in-person versus virtual. It's our hope that the state tournament will be done virtual in person this year in March, and we are going to try our best to make sure that happens. We are planning for both ways because we do not want to have happen to us what happened in 2020, where we, when COVID first came out, and we had to cancel the tournament because that's all we were prepared to do. So we will plan it both ways, and hopefully be able to do it in person. And at some point, we'll have to make that decision. We'll try to make it as close as we can if we're going to change it, but I think that's what we're doing. We have to work with hotels and with the Thurston County Courthouse and things of that nature. So we're going to do our best to do it in person. But if at some point it looks like the levels of disease activity or such that we're not going to be able to do it, then we'll switch to virtual. Unfortunately, because the state tournament is earlier by a couple of weeks than it usually is, we're probably going to have our district tournaments a little earlier. Some of them may be more likely to go to virtual because they have to make that decision sooner. And so they have to base it on the information they have and have to recruit volunteers. You recruit a different pool of volunteers when you're recruiting virtually than you are recruiting for in-person. And it's not always just you can switch them over and say, okay, now we're going to do it this way. So each tournament will have to make that decision. We'll try to get them to give you the information as soon as they can, and we'll try to make it as much in person as we can. I hope that answers what I'm sure a lot of you are wondering.
Yeah, and I'll
have a-
add to that as well. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, no, if you're going to do that, I can ask once you add on to that.
Okay. Yeah, we're working closely with all of our conveners. Each courthouse in each county has different guidelines and restrictions. And even right now for Thurston County, they have not changed their guidelines since the beginning of COVID. So there's a lot of social distancing still in place and masks, regardless of the county guidelines. With the Department of Health or the governor's guidelines. So we're just keeping the pulse on that as we go. So capacity issues are coming up and keeping an eye on equity issues, for teams and counties. And then as a Y sponsored program. And now I haven't read all the details of the governor's announcement today, but with vaccination requirements and or a negative test for large groups, we just have a lot of logistics to put into place. Our goal is to be in person, like Judge Lewis said, and keeping everyone safe while doing so. And so we will keep you in touch. Our hope is to not take payments too soon in case we have to do any partial refunds. And then I wanted to address the fee difference. If we are virtual like last year, we will change the fees a little bit, just keeping in mind that there's still costs associated with running our program and keeping the longevity and stability of the program alive. So that was one thing I wanted to address. And then Judge Lewis did address the timing of state due to hotel capacity and reservations. We did have to bump it up just a little bit, but we're hoping to get most of the tournaments in late January and then throughout February. So we still have a lot of time to prep. So we're with you. We're on your side of being in person, but wanting to be as safe as possible. And then a lot is just, we're at the mercy of the courthouses. So we'll be in touch. Matt, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. Related with tryouts, I think Blanchette will be a club and we'll be fortunate to just have enough kids to put the team together. So I'm highly doubting we'll actually have a tryout. So I'm curious, without knowing the kids, how would you go about selecting which ones would take each role? I would anticipate that obviously some of the roles are harder than others. So how would you vet that out?
Well, I can give you, Jennifer can answer this too, but it's hard. That's the short answer. It's very difficult. I didn't realize I was going to be doing this by myself, we would have probably started a lot sooner. My team's pretty behind this year. And so as far as the tryouts go, what I've done is our kids all, I hope at this point, all have speeches from last year. Normally they would do probably a lot more, but not this year. I just don't have time for that. But it's amazing how much you can learn from just having a kid give a speech. I've told them to try to get off note. I've told them to try to memorize it. As far as the different roles go, it's one thing to say, okay, well, this person's varsity, this person's JV, but then trying to figure out who's going to play, the expert witness, who's going to play, these different roles. One thing is I want to hear what the kids want to do. That's number one. I want to hear what they're interested in. And that's a big deal. We always explain to them, you may not be exactly doing what you want to do, but we are going to try to make that happen. But it depends, it depends on how things kind of work out. We've got, certain kids' personality. Lucia, who's one of my seniors, she is pretty amazing. I think she was one of the best attorneys last year, but she is, she's like a 35-year-old woman, the way she talks. She's just so mature. So she's always my expert witness. And she just, I don't know, I can just tell by listening to her. She's our pretrialer. And I think, the answer is hard. But that's the reason why the tryouts, no one's getting cut. We would never cut anybody from our program ever. Like that would just never happen. But the tryouts really are just kind of to give the coaches an idea. Since you're a new kid, I have no clue where to put you. First of all, what speech do you want to try? What would you like to, and just that little bit helps than just, kind of saying, I don't know you at all, but here, do this. So we're at least trying, but it's definitely not super easy. So I don't know if that helps.
That helps. Thank you very much.
I would probably echo some of what Tracy said, especially asking the kids, find out first who wants to be what. The other thing I would say is do what you can to emphasize that witnesses are as important as lawyers on a team. We have won and lost rounds based on our witnesses. And yeah, Tracy, you know that. Kids who think, oh, only the lawyers are the important ones, that's just flat out not true. So I would encourage kids to sort of think about what their strengths are rather than what's more important or what's better. I just think that that's, how can you contribute to the team is the best question to ask. Think carefully with your kids when you're trying to decide which lawyers do which roles, though. Pre-trial needs somebody who can think on their feet really quick. And so that's pretty important. Expert witnesses need to have the capacity to hang on to a lot of detail off the top of their heads with no notes. And so they have to remember things like measurements and, all sorts of scientific detail and stuff. So the kid who can do that, that's probably your expert. But the kid who can, take something and run with it a little bit, that can be sort of the character witness, the Uber driver or whatever, that, they contribute somewhat to the case, not a ton, but they're fun. Like they're kind of fun to watch. So I'd give that kid that role because see what they can make of it.
This is Patrick Trumpeter. I've got a question for the panel. What are everybody's best tricks to get students to focus in October instead of in January? I always feel like we are, it's the heat of competition that seems to light a fire under everybody. And I really, really want to get a lot more progress done early in the year than we have in past years. So I'd love people's thoughts about that.
I think that's a challenge every single year. Every single year when you're like, oh, we have till January to get them dialed in. I think we build up the excitement of the case is going to come out, and everyone's excited about that. And then I think, for us, we just start talking about the different roles and what could be a theory for the state or, the defense. And it's a challenge. It is. And having the kids do the drafting and writing, that's not the funnest part of mock trial. It's not. And so, that's why we figured out, because we didn't used to do tryouts. I love the idea of bringing the new kids into the courtroom right at the beginning, because when they don't see the courtroom for a really long time, they're like, what are we doing? This is so much work and it's not fun. So I like to bring them in at the very beginning and kind of get them excited about, you're going to get to be in here and cross-examine witnesses and give a speech. And I think I figured out finally that if we can get them to kind of see, and I think of the new kids, what it could be like, then it's like, okay, well, then it's not so bad having to spend all this time reading this big, huge case, writing all the questions, writing the speech. But it's a challenge. That's a really great question because it is a challenge.
Yeah, I agree. December in particular is a little bit of a slog because it just seems like the competition's so far away. I would lay out some deadlines, like let's have all the speeches done by here, or first drafts for sure, done by this date, crosses done by this date. I think that helps. I think intra-squad between the kids, some sort of scrimmage in December is a good idea too, because then at least it's somewhat like a trial, very roughly like a trial, and they start to see the fun of it.
This is such great conversation. We are technically over time right now, but I would love, if you have additional questions or whatnot, would love to stick around and help answer those. But totally understand that we are past 7, so if you need to log off, please feel free to do so. But thank you all so much for coming to our training. I hope this was helpful And we have the case being released on the 22nd, which is next week. And then we have an informational session coming the next day right after that. And we'll be sending out the Zoom link to that on the 18th. So
What time that'll be, Emily?
it'll be midday.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
I asked the staff to comment on this. If there are abilities to see the state championship round. Last year, we had a lot of cases that were done virtually at the district tournament. Are any of those available for people to show their students or to look at if they want to? If you wanted to see a round from a district tournament, or how things did, are those available somewhere, or could they be made available?
We do have them. They are private links, so you can't just access them from going online and looking for it. But if you're interested in viewing one of those, please reach out to our office. And I'll just say that the championship round was recorded by TVW, and so that is available to see anytime.
Right. It's nice to see that, but it's also might be helpful if you're trying to motivate kids to show them how people look in the district tournament, and maybe some of the things that they did, and that the kids that you're going against are not always, the super kids that made it to the championship round, that there are other kids there, and if they can do it, you can do it as well. So that's just a suggestion that if people want kids to learn more about it, how they would do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and go. I appreciate everybody being here. And remember, we do have your names. You will not be allowed to drop out. So don't even think about it.
And thank you so much to Judge Lewis and to our two panelists. Really appreciate your time and expertise and answering your questions.
Good night.